So after putting up my first reel about a month ago, I've gotten a lot of questions since then about my flight training progression and specifically relating to my experience with ATP's flight school. So I thought instead of answering all those, it'd be way easier for me to just lay all my thoughts down here for you guys to see. So here are the things that I'm going to cover today. So feel free to skip ahead to the chapters below for what's most applicable to you. All right, so let's start with what ATP actually is. So ATP is the largest flight school in the US. They are a Part 61 program with 82 locations that operate over 550 aircraft. They are an absolute massive program, which does have some pros and some cons that we'll cover later. ATP is meant to be a very professional program. This is not a casual flight school. This is a program that you go to go from start to finish very, very quickly and very, very thoroughly in order to get you to an aviation career, whether it be airline, Part 135. It's really geared to push you towards that. So let me talk real quick about my experience with ATP because it's going to be somewhat unique just because of the timing and because of where I was in life. So I retired from being a police officer in 2019 and started at ATP in very late 2019. So I took my first flight in November 2019 and was able to progress through my PPL and actually took my check ride for my PPL in January of 2020. Went right into the instrument phase, got my instrument rating in March of 2020. And then went right into the commercial program, finished up my commercial in late April, right into the multi-engine program, and finished my multi-engine certification in late May of 2020, which is where I ended up leaving the program. So ATP is a pipeline program. So as long as you don't bust too many check rides, you can go straight from being a student into their CFI school, and then they'll employ you as a CFI. I decided not to go that route, and there's a couple big reasons why. The first one was, if you were paying attention to those dates, there was something else that was going on right in the middle of that, and that was, worldwide pandemic. So fortunately, we were able to continue flying through that, even though some different industries were shutting down. Through some creative interpretation of the regulations, we continued to fly. I was comfortable with it. My instructors were comfortable with it, so I was able to continue earning those ratings. But during that, we saw a huge dip in enrollment. So the students weren't coming in, and instructor courses weren't happening nearly as often. I decided to leave the program after getting my commercial multi-engine rating, but I had several friends that stayed in. It took them several months, I think till October, to get into a CFI school. And then after they finished that, it was somewhere around December before they actually saw a student. So, it was another additional 7-8 months before they were able to start flying with students and start earning money with students. Fortunately, I'd been skydiving for a long time and had a solid network there. So after doing a little bit of flying myself, I was able to jump in and start flying skydivers, which is really how I earned the bulk of my time thereafter. So overall, I had a great experience with ATP. It was a very good fit for me, even though it was very fast-paced. There wasn't a lot of downtime, so I was able to really progress very, very quickly without regressing because of long gaps between flights, week, 2 weeks between flights. So like I said, it worked really well for me. It may not work as well for some people. So let's talk about the pros and cons, and then a little bit about who this program is best for and who may want to look for another program. The first and biggest pro is that it is a very quick program. If you are trying to jumpstart your aviation career, you can do it very quickly with ATP. I took my very first flight in late November of 2019 and finished my commercial multi-engine rating in late May. So in a little over 6 months, I had earned everything from a PPL to a commercial multi-engine rating, which is extraordinarily quick. The other is that ATP starts working with you extraordinarily early. As soon as you sign up for a course, be that a month, 2 months, 3 months out, they assign you an instructor, and that instructor starts prepping you. So you're going to take some online ground school before you show up. And while it's not required, they absolutely prefer you to get all of your writtens out of the way. I had the time and I had the dedication and commitment. So before I even stepped into an ATP classroom, I had completed all of my written exams, my PPL, instrument, and commercial. All of those written exams were done and out of the way. The instructor that assigned me had me take a bunch of practice tests and then endorsed me to take those once he felt confident that I was going to be able to pass those. I think the lowest I scored on any of those tests was a 97. So I had all those out of the way, so I didn't have to worry about, that studying for those tests when I showed up. It was all about flying and all about prepping for check rides. One of the other biggest pros is aircraft and instructor availability. ATP is one of the largest purchasers of Archers out there. They comprise most of their fleet, and they're all brand new. I had 250 hours before I ever saw a six-pack in an aircraft. We flew G1000s on everything that we flew. I think the oldest aircraft was 2020, and the oldest aircraft I'd ever flown was built in 2019. There's several times that I jumped in an aircraft that had 7 hours on it. So you're going to fly extraordinarily new aircraft. There's plenty of aircraft. You're never going to be wanting for that. You're never going to be stunted in your schedule because, there's just not the planes available. And then on the flip side of that, there are plenty of instructors. You get assigned instructors for a particular phase. So during your PPL, you're going to have the same instructor. Your instrument's probably going to be a different instructor, commercial, different instructor as well. This does a few things. One, it makes sure that you always have an instructor available because he's scheduling you like that with his other students that he's assigned. But two, it gives you different perspectives on things. Instead of keeping the same instructor throughout your entire flight training progression, you get to see different perspectives from different instructors, which really helps in the long run make you a more well-rounded pilot. ATP is also a very structured program. So you're going to know that you're getting a good program that's really going to not only prepare you for your check rides, but prepare you for a career in aviation. Everything that they do is pushed towards that. So there's a lot of focus on crew resource management, on checklists and challenge response. There's all of this is just geared towards making you a more professional pilot. So you know that as soon as you leave ATP, you're so much more well equipped when you're going to go to your ATP, CTP, or to a type rating course. One of the other big pros is DPE availability, especially right now, and especially in the Houston area where I live. Getting a DPE for a check ride can take weeks, if not months. ATP had a bank of DPEs that they regularly used. So scheduling those was a lot easier because that was really the only check rides that those DPEs were doing. So it was easy enough to say, hey, my student's ready, let's get a ride next week. So this is really helpful in not having a big break in the program. My instructor would look at our flight progression and realize, okay, he's going to be ready here next week, even though we still have 2 or 3 flights left. So he would go ahead and schedule that DPE maybe a week out, tops 2 weeks out, but we still have flights to get there. So there's very rarely more than 4 or 5 days between my last flight and my check ride for that particular rating. And then because of that, I would literally start my next training the day after my check ride. So check ride on instrument phase was on a Friday, and we'd start flying commercial stuff on Saturday. Like I mentioned before, another pro is the guaranteed instructor job. As long as you don't bust too many check rides, I can't remember what the number is, if it's 2 or 3 check rides. As long as you don't bust too many check rides, you will be guaranteed a job as a CFI at ATP. This is a really good guarantee because you can go straight into it. Normally, in a non-pandemic environment, it's fairly seamless. You literally go out to CFI school. I believe that takes about 2 weeks. You come back and boom, they assign you students and you're rocking and rolling. And of course, one of the largest reasons that people attend ATP is the pipeline. ATP has agreements with several different airline carriers out there, many of which have feeder programs from ATP. So a lot of them will actually come in and sign you very early with like 250 hours, basically contracting you to work for them, and they give you a stipend while you're a CFI earning up to those 1,500 hours. Obviously, one of the biggest pros, because you understand that, man, from the day that I get that CFI rating, I'm really going to have a job as long as I just continue to trudge forward and grind forward and commit to that program. All right, so obviously there's a lot of pros to ATP, but there are some cons that if you're considering flight training with ATP, you should understand. The first one and biggest con is going to be the cost. It is a very expensive program. The caveat to that is that ATP does offer financing for those loans. It's really not a bad percentage rate, and it's a very good option to do if you're just really wanting to get it done. One of the other cons is if you're prior military like me, because ATP is a Part 61 school, it does not qualify for the GI Bill. Now, things may have changed since I've been through, but I was not able to use my GI Bill or post 9/11 or whatever you guys have for that flight training like you would with a Part 141 college-based program. The other big con that may turn some people off is ATP is a full-time commitment. There were several people that tried to work during our program, nights, in the service industry, maybe being a waiter, bartender at night, but it was very difficult to balance both. You are flying every day. If the weather is conducive to the phase that you're in, you're going to fly every day. And that doesn't include the ground school. That doesn't include travel time. So you're going to spend 2 hours in the air with a debrief. So you call it 4 hours on your flight portion a day, plus the studying, plus the ground school, and prepping for check rides. It's a very difficult thing to do and still try to work another full-time job. So hopefully you're in a place where you have the time to do that, or the finances to do that, but it does require a full-time commitment. The other thing to remember, and this may be a con for some or a pro for others, and it was a pro for me, but this is not a at your own pace kind of course like other Part 61 programs. The op tempo can be a little intense. You are literally going to fly every day that it is flyable, sometimes twice a day. There were several days that I had a 2-hour flight in the morning, I'd take lunch, and then I'd come back for another 2-hour flight in the afternoon. And that was on top of the studying and prepping for check rides. So that can get a little overwhelming to some. So, if you're really not able to study on your own, or it's, your focus isn't really there, then another program may be better for you because you are going to be flying a lot and it's going to be a lot of information all at once. All right, so after we've talked about the pros and cons of ATP, who is this program really designed for? And the answer to that is those that are looking for a career in aviation right now, especially if you're going to a Part 121. If you want to fly airlines, you want to fly big metal, seniority is everything. The better seniority number you have and the faster you can start, that progression as well. And you want a program that's really going to set you up for success going through that training as well, then ATP is for you. If you're somebody that just wants to do aviation as a hobby, not necessarily make a career out of it, maybe do a little bit on the side here and there, I might look at another program that's a little bit more at your own pace and dialed back just a little bit. Also, if you are unable to make the full-time commitment, ATP is not for you and will get very overwhelming very quickly. So ATP is obviously not the only option out there. It may be the best option for you. It may not, but there's other routes to flight training out there. I get asked a lot, hey, knowing what you know now, would you do it the same way over again? And that's a really weird question because I really don't know. Everything has worked out very well for me. I actually, during the pandemic, not a lot of flying going on, and I ended up offshooting to a different route and taking another job that was outside of aviation for a couple years that turned out to be an amazing experience, and I still work with them today. So it worked out for me. So if I had to do all over again, sure, I'd probably go about it the same way. The training there was absolutely fantastic. Man, it got me from point A to point B very quickly, and I'm thankful that I did it that way. But if that's not for you, remember, there's other Part 61 programs out there. There's flight schools all over the place. I can think of the 2 airports close to me have 6 flight schools combined, and that's not even, none of them are on a major airport. So there's a lot of other flight training programs out there that you can take a little bit more casual, slower, for whatever works best for you. Other options are 141 programs, so programs that are based around colleges, around trade schools, that have a very structured program, but it's also a little bit slower. These programs may also qualify for the GI Bill or other loan options, so may be a better option financially and commitment-wise for you out there. The other option that I talk about to a lot of people, and that may have been the only other option that I would have gone, is buying your own aircraft at the beginning. It might sound a little ridiculous to say, hey, go buy an aircraft with 0 flight time, but hear me out. If you can find someone in the industry that can help you purchase the right aircraft for you, that's in good condition, that you can put a couple hundred hours on, you won't have to worry about aircraft availability or renting a plane at $150+ an hour plus paying an instructor. Now all you're doing is paying that instructor the $50 or whatever it is an hour for flight instruction. There is some cost associated with maintaining the plane over the year or 2 that you may have it, but at the end of that training, you can decide to do one of 2 things. You can either keep the airplane because you enjoy having an aircraft, or you can sell the aircraft. I recently sold the AA-1 Grumman that I bought a couple years ago and was able to make 30% above what I paid for it just in 2 years. Most aircraft are going to appreciate, especially if you put just a little bit into them. So depending on the aircraft, it's likely that you can get most of your maintenance costs covered during that year or two that you may have had the aircraft and the appreciation that you'll get from selling the aircraft on the back end. So at the end of the day, you really need to look at, what are my aviation goals? Am I trying to make a career out of this? Is this going to be a hobby? And then take an honest look at what flight training program is going to fit into your lifestyle. Maybe it's ATP, maybe it's another program, maybe it's buying your own aircraft. So I hope this has answered some of your questions, but if you have more questions, I would love to answer those too. Leave them in the comments below, and let's have a discussion about them. Thanks for watching.